Hi, welcome back to CineMunn Podcast here on YouTube. I'm your host, Vince Munn. I'm joined tonight by Tommy Metropolis.
Thank you, Vince.
Benjamin Briggs has a night off. Tonight we are going to do our first review of The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies. Just came out today, Wednesday, December 17th, 2014. We both had the chance to see it a little early, let's say 48 hours at most, so really not the greatest screenings. But we got to see it early nonetheless, and so it's been festering in our minds. And we just want to talk, share it with you. Hopefully our opinion gives you some insight, some thought, if you want to see the film or not. Obviously, I will say I do recommend seeing it if you have been invested whatsoever in Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings franchise. This is a needed piece to finish the puzzle, because it is the final chapter, the last time that we are going to venture into Middle-earth, at least with Peter Jackson and his current crew down there in New Zealand. First thoughts, generally I like the film. Overall, it was a good film. It was fun. It still has the great effects. It's got a great cast. The action is awesome. Camera technique is fine. Costuming, character moments, not as many as are usual in these films, but there are still a few good character moments. The battles are spectacular. I mean, they really are. They blow your mind. It's amazing what you can do now with computers and how fluid and beautiful and detailed the pieces of armor are, the weapons are, the sets, the rocks, everything. I mean, it's amazing the work and time and the effort that goes into these films. Obviously, we will get into a little bit of nitpicking and the good, the bad, and the overall thoughts. Tell me what were your initial reactions to Battle of Five Armies.
Initially, I liked it. It gave me closure to the saga, so I can now connect The Hobbit as to where, Lord of the Rings started up. And I haven't read the books myself. I know I'm a bit ashamed about that.
That's terrible. You sinner.
Right. But being able to see that on a cinematic, at the cinematic form, it's something I appreciate. Like you were mentioning effects and just kind of bringing that to life for that general audience, those kind of people like me that haven't read the book. To me, it was a fun piece. Obviously, the first two Hobbits, The Unexpected Journey and Desolation of Smaug, had established the story. This is closing off the story of where Desolation of Smaug ended off. And as I mentioned before, it is that closure. It was fun. It was entertaining to watch, and the effects do give it that spunk that really you want to go see in a movie setting. So that's one thing I did like, or a couple things I did like about it.
Now we will be getting into spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie, or if you're still thinking about seeing the movie, please feel free to not listen to the rest of the show. So feel free to like this video, save it to your favorites page, and come back to listen to us after you've seen the movie, and give us your own opinion in our comments section. Also on Twitter, @CineMunn. But now let's get into it. First off, the bad. This film is 2 hours and 24 minutes long. I believe that's including credits, and you feel it. It does feel like a shorter film. You get to the midpoint fairly quickly. You know exactly where it's going to go. Obviously, the title gives away it's a Battle of Five Armies. You're going to see a battle of five armies. There's at least five, maybe six, if Gandalf counts as a battle on his own, because he's not human or hobbit or dwarf or elf. He's a wizard. One-man army. He's got magic and swords and shit. So the Battle of Five Armies, possibly six.
Should do
some of the effects were a little too over the top. Some of the stuff they did was just a little too much. One of them being Legolas running on falling rocks as he goes off to fight the Orc Bolg on the mountain pass was a little bit too much. At some points, you just kind of find yourself chuckling. I did, at least.
I did too.
You did?
mean, I can understand why he did it. I mean,
it's a payoff. In every single film, he's got one big scene. I mean, the first film was, killing the giant troll in Fellowship. In Two Towers, he rode the shield down the stairs.
Yep.
In Return of the King, he took down the giant elephant all by himself, and Gimli told him it still only counts as one. And then in Desolation of Smaug, he rode down the spider. Right. He rode down the spider web onto the spider, killed that spider, and confronted Thorin and the company. So, obviously every film he's going to have one kind of big scene, one over-the-top big action scene. But this one was just a little too much. I mean, the other ones, they're all too much, but they're fun. This one just felt like a groan. Like, really, you can see the effect. You can see the CG version of himself. It didn't really feel that genuine or real.
No.
So that kind of pulled me out for just a second. The armies look really cool. I don't think there was a single actual dwarf army person aside from Dane. After Dane and his company of dwarves arrive at Erebor to help out Thorin, his cousin. Even at points, Dane looked a little fake to me. I was wondering if he's even a fully realized character on set, or if he himself was just motion captured in by the actor Billy Connolly. I honestly wondered, because parts of his face, his eyes, his hair, his whole body didn't at all seem real to me. And I can understand it's been done before in Thor: The Dark World, in the opening prologue, when Thor's grandfather Bor comes into the battle on the Dark Elves world. His helmet on the actor, they actually didn't have a helmet for him. That was a complete CG helmet on his whole head. So yes, they can't CG an entire army. They can CG armor onto a single character, be it an actor in a scene that they just didn't have the piece for, they didn't have the time for it, or it just didn't work out the way they thought it would. So they redesign it in their own way they want it to look and just add it on later in post. So that kind of bothered me. The madness of Thorin. Obviously, if you've read the books, you know Thorin does go a little batshit crazy once he gets back into Erebor. It's all about him keeping control of the mountain. Obviously, it is a focal point of the film, of the whole book, in fact, that he's reclaiming his home. The elves are trying to reclaim what they believe is theirs. The men are trying to reclaim money that was promised to them by Thorin. So his madness was justified in some ways, but was over the top. And the scene in the Great Hall where he's walking on the floor of gold and the floor seems to come alive and swallow him up in his own madness. I understand the metaphor that it is, but I didn't really need to see it done that way. I think a bit more reliance on the performance, which the performance is fine. I mean, Richard Armitage is a great actor, and he's proven that throughout this whole series. You've seen a full character arc for Thorin Oakenshield, and they didn't need to emphasize it with the effects around it with the floor. I didn't feel it was necessary, and I kind of wish that was taken out. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. Tommy, what did you think about it? What was the bad to you for this film? Things that stuck out.
There were a couple things that stuck out, as you brought up earlier, like the Legolas scene. And the other thing, too, what I was feeling and kind of noticing is the 46 frame rate. I noticed right away, and I started to ignore it, but there were certain scenes in the movie that started coming back, and I was like, kind of going back and forth, like to paying attention to this, or, just kind of the film, the way it's moving along. But that was kind of one thing that got to me. It is a bit minor, but at the same time, it's noticeable. When I'm zoned in, when I'm seeing a film,
you're in the film.
I'm in the film. I don't want to be...
You don't want to be drawn out.
I don't want to be distracted. So, and going with that, too, it's being distracted. I mean, you talk about the whole Hobbit trilogy, how it's taken the story and kind of expanded it a bit.
Yeah.
And so with the Battle of Five Armies, because of the closure, there's only a limited amount of stuff they can do in this film.
Yeah.
So some of the scenes do drag on, as you were talking about the Thorn's madness. It does kind of drag on a bit. There was a couple scenes where you would feel like, okay, this is going to be the next, like he's going to get over this or realize this. It was just, it kind of persisted on the same thing for a couple scenes or for an extended period in the movie, and then you get to the exaggerated conclusion of how Thorn realizes himself and overcomes his madness.
Yeah.
And as you also brought up, the CG it wasn't too distracting, but noticeable. There were a couple things where you could say, maybe, I don't know. I mean, it's not to say it
might have been just a little too much.
It's not going to kill the film.
No.
But I can understand for making a film like this of that scale, magnitude, all the content you got in there, when you're talking about practical effects, you're talking about something like constructing armor or getting all the pieces down. That's, not possible in some cases. And for a movie like this where you have to go back into a different age, different time, you got to construct that and apply it with CG. So would you say if they use CG in areas that they shouldn't have? I mean, it's a I would say in some scenes possibly, but and with CG nowadays, it's like you can see it. So I feel directors definitely need to be careful with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, he has Jackson with Lord of the Rings. The hard part with it is when they went to a set like Rivendell, like the Weathertop, like Moria. It really didn't feel like a set. It felt like a place. It felt so real. He drew you in there. He did such a good job drawing you into that world that it felt like a genuine world. It felt like a real place that you could go to and visit and see people and see these moments that were captured. With The Hobbit, you still got that. With Unexpected Journey, you still got that feeling. With Desolation of Smaug, even, you still got that feeling. With Battle of Five Armies, though, unfortunately, it felt like a set, or it felt like a CG environment, kind of going, it's almost slanderous to say the route of the Star Wars prequels, where it was an entirely CG environment and it's just actors on a green screen stage, which requires a lot more of the actor in that type of environment, because they have to imagine everything. And there were certain scenes that just looked around that person like they were cut into that scene, that was built entirely around them and that was never really there. And that kind of drew me out of the film, and as it didn't feel as real in certain aspects. Again, overall, I enjoyed the film. I thought it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. It came to a conclusion I thought it would. It ended about where I thought it would end. Certain character beats were kind of missing, like a final goodbye with the dwarves, with Bilbo. They had that scene, but it didn't really feel that way. It didn't really feel like a final goodbye. And overall, to me, the film did not feel like a final film. I felt that it's done, the series is done, but it didn't feel like that sensation you get when you know it's the last film. That emotional, that's just missing. For me, it was the emotional connection to the series. By then, I read The Hobbit several times over growing up, so I've known the story, where it goes, what's going to happen to each character, when and where. So knowing that Thorin Oakenshield will die, and have his final last words with Bilbo of forgiveness and friendship, knowing that was coming was good. And the emotional impact that it had for me reading it, and even seeing it in the old 70s, I believe it was Rankin Bass cartoon from 77, that had a much more emotional pull on me than this film did. Which is too bad, because I really love the actors. I really love Martin Freeman. When I heard about The Hobbit was being made, I said to myself, Martin Freeman has to play Bilbo, because he looks just like Ian Holm, a younger version of him, and he would perfectly cast. And he was. So, I mean, that's, if I see it, someone much smarter than me is going to see it. And I'm hoping that's true with the supposed Marvel Sony rumors as well. But enough about that. Tanya, was there anything that stood out to you, good or bad, really? I mean, that stuck to you? Did you have any type of emotional connection whatsoever to the characters? Did you have any feeling of emptiness, of fulfillment with the film?
I'd say a strong one for me was Smaug.
Smaug.
Just, you kind of get that sense of how he's deceiving, he's kind of, just how smart he is, intelligent, and things like that. And that's kind of established in the second installment, Desolation of Smaug, but in the Battle of Five Armies, his character felt lacking of what was set up in Desolation. He just became kind of like, where he's here, and his only motive is vengeance. Yeah. And I understand why that's his only motive, but at the same time, it's like, where did your character go? Your character the
character was gone.
Right, you still built a character in the previous film, yeah. So part of that in the opening sequence did play out for me with Smaug. And overall, just as far as scenes popping out, as you mentioned, like the ending, like the goodbye, that was it was one of those things that, it could have been a bit more constructed, I guess you could say, because it is kind of saying farewell to the trilogy, but at the same time, not, because you got Lord of the Rings, and that's another thing. Also, another thing is that you probably get those remarks from people saying that, no, Lord of the Rings had that ending that just dragged on and on and on. And it's like, fans didn't like that, so it was kind of Peter Jackson's take of saying, I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to make it a bit more simple, so, you know, for maybe those who go out and grab the extended edition are going to see how things are intended. And that's kind of one thing I'm looking forward to with the Battle of Five Armies. There was material in there that I felt was cut out, and that was one thing I could kind of hint upon while watching the movie, is that there's just like a scene here or there that could possibly tie just maybe these two sequences together, and
make a little more clarity.
Clarity, yes. And so I've, like, when the Lord of the Rings came out with the extended versions, I actually, you know, sat down, watched them all, and they made a difference for me. They actually, like, character-wise, development, it tied scenes together, as I just previously stated. And that's what I'm hoping going to do soon here with The Hobbit, is to sit down, watch the extended versions, and then wait for, obviously, Battle of Five Armies to release theirs, and be on that lookout for that
bundle pack.
The whole
3 movies, 1 box, all day.
6 movies.
Well,
3 Hobbit.
3 Lord of the Rings. Yeah, that's a 24-hour marathon. If we sat down and watched all of them extended cut, if you watch them all extended cut, yeah, it's like a 24-hour marathon.
Yeah, it's it would be
but I mean, The Hobbit really doesn't need the multiple endings that Lord of the Rings honestly did need the multiple endings, because you had so many storylines going this way and that that eventually all came together in the end film. You still had to finish them off, because they do again break up and go separate ways.
Right.
And so you had to have those separate conclusions. So people bitching about that bothered me, because you know, they say they want a good movie and you know, they want a proper ending. That was the proper ending. If you read the books, the book does have ending after ending after ending to finish the story before you finally get down to the last chapter and to the last couple pages. It does have those multiple endings, so there was a necessity for those films. With The Hobbit, it is a little more of a straightforward book from A, B, and C. You go to this, to that, to that. And there is only one ending, because there is, while you have multiple main characters, once you go back down to The Hobbit, there's still just one little Hobbit that you're focused on in the film. And they did give you the kind of multiple endings where he does leave Erebor and goes back home. He does part with Gandalf, and he does go back to his own little home where they're having the auction of his stuff, because people say, you know, he disappeared, so he's not living here anymore, so we're going to sell all his crap. And the thing they touched on very lightly, which I thought would have been a little bit more, was that it was his relatives that he doesn't care for are the ones selling all his stuff and going off with his property, which is why he has that one little scene about his spoons, and he confronts that woman who is his cousin, selling all his stuff and trying to take his wealth that he does have.
Right.
One scene that I was hoping for, because it would have been a little bit of a payoff, was when Bilbo reclaimed his share of the treasure from Erebor. Because in Unexpected Journey, after they fight the trolls and Gandalf comes back and saves the dwarves and Bilbo from the 3 trolls and the Elrond of Stone, they go into the little cave. And that's where Bilbo gets his sword, that's where Gandalf finds his sword, and Thorin finds Orcus, his sword. And what you see, 2 dwarves, Glowin and I believe Nori, are burying a little chest in the ground. And Bilbo asks them, you know, what's that? And they're saying long-term investment.
Right.
So basically saying they're going to come back later and pick it up. It's going to be just like a little extra bonus money on top of the treasure in Erebor. And when Bilbo leaves and goes back home, you see him under his arm is a little chest. And I'm hoping to God they filmed it and that it comes in extended cut. That Bilbo will go back to that cave and reclaim that little treasure.
Yeah.
And that Gandalf might ask him, you know, what is that? And he'll say to them, long-term investment. That's why I think that scene would play out. And for me, would be that conclusion of that initial start in Unexpected Journey.
Right.
Overall, Tommy, final thoughts on the Hobbit Battle of Five Armies? Would you see it again?
5 Armies, I would see again. It's definitely entertaining. It's entertaining enough to pick up on. As I mentioned, there's stuff that feels left out, but at the same time, movies that I've encountered like that, if I rewatch them, see them again, I tend to pick up more material the second time around. And it's not to say I'm not paying attention. It's just that when you have a movie playing out a certain way, sometimes you don't pay attention. You don't see the little detail. It's there. It's on the screen. But the movie is not focused on that. So you don't really take that in right away. Mm-hmm. And so when you see a movie again, there's been a few movies. I mean, Shutter Island is definitely one. Like you see that again. I know that's a bit different, but Battle of Five Armies, it was definitely entertaining enough to where I could go and recapture moments and even gain more of what I saw previously first time around. And also linking it together with the past films. Maybe I'll see something in the second time around, be like, hey, I recall this from Desolation of Smaug or Unexpected Journey, or maybe this is something from further on, like in the Lord of the Rings trilogy arc.
Well, they kind of give you that when Thranduil tells Legolas to go north to the Dunedain Rangers. There's one there. He's called Strider by the common folk. What his real name is, you'll have to discover for yourself. And that I think was their kind of little hint, like, hey, we're gonna go towards Lord of the Rings now, and you know where all this goes. You've seen them.
Yeah,
that's why you're sitting here.
Yeah.
I mean, that would obviously be a light touch to it. Gollum obviously was another kind of light touch. The ring overall that Bilbo carried was an overall arcing piece.
Well, it is a light touch. And the other thing, too, is just I look at this as, what if these arcs were reversed? What if The Hobbit was made first and Lord of the Rings made second?
After.
What characters would be... I mean, obviously, in my perspective, if The Hobbit was done first, you wouldn't get that scene with Legolas.
No, Legolas would not be in there at all.
So that whole alluding to, oh yeah, you know, go seek out this Strider. You're not going to get that, and that's one of the things. Like the way when I see movies like this from front to back or in reverse direction like that, it's one of those things where if it was done properly the first time. And not saying that these films are done so bad that you can't call them proper. They link each other up, they set each other up, and you can watch them from beginning to end, and you could follow the whole arc. But my thing is, as far as when they come out time-wise, you know, you had Lord of the Rings that were in the early 2000s, and then you had The Hobbit that just concluded in 2014. So it's one of those things where it's like, what would I have changed? Of course, as I mentioned, I haven't read the books, but it's one of those things is be like, I've seen Lord of the Rings, but if I've seen The Hobbit, what are some of the things I would have changed to kind of make it more
story? To
make it more one story, because that's the other thing with The Hobbit, just even that arc it's a bit of multiple stories. I mean, Thorin Oakenshield and Bilbo, I mean, they're two stories crossed. They also have...
Saruman, Gandalf threw in there.
They also have that story too, and I mean, all that needs to be explained for Lord of the Rings. But the thing is, if Lord of the Rings wasn't done, that didn't have to be done. They could have came out with a Hobbit movie, done the Lord of the Rings, and then be like, all right, now we're going to do something in between, kind of do that little go back sort of thing. Yeah, to kind of fill in the gap.
Okay.
But that's just me knowing that all 6 films are done, knowing that what I've seen. That was one of the things that came to my mind. That was like, how would I reapproach this? And I mean, like as you mentioned earlier, this is the end for Peter Jackson's Hobbit, Lord of the Rings arc, and we're possibly most likely going to see another director take a jab at this further down the road. But that again that's completely different from now. So. The Battle of Five Armies brought the closure to the Hobbit arc. As I mentioned, Desolation of Smaug, how like I got into more Smaug's character, how I got into more of Oakenshield and a bit more of the story. I mean, that was something that I felt the Battle of Five Armies did need, as opposed to its previous 2 installments. The Battle of Five Armies did have just the basic conclusion, and it was elaborated. Yeah. Not done to a point to where it's unbearable. It's just, it's elaborated when you're like, okay.
Well, I mean,
So-
overall, the whole series from Unexpected Journey through Desolation, even to Battle, was all elaborated. 'Cause, I mean, they took a lot of Thorin's backstory where he talks about the White Orc and his meeting with him, and the legacy of Erebor and the city of Dale on the hill that overlooks it, was all taken from the appendices and from the section of the appendices in Return of the King. If you finish Return of the King, the book, there's a section called the appendices, which gives you a history of Middle-earth, or like a basic history, and one of them is called Of Durin's Folk, which is basically of the dwarvish people. And in there you will find all that stuff about Dale, about the dwarves losing Erebor, about Thrain and Thror fighting the White Orc, and how Thorin then rose up and was named king of the Lonely Mountain.
Right.
So all that you'll find in there, which obviously they took and threw into these films. To elaborate, it is a short book. The Hobbit's like a 310-page book. It's not that big. It was written, Tolkien had written it as a story for his children.
Right.
And even like the first review from I can't remember the name of the publisher. For the life of me, I can't remember it. But the publisher gave the book to his son to review, and the review they published was the son's review. Gave it like a basic, Bilbo Baggins is a hobbit, la da 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 da. Story's good little action, little moments, good for your kids age da da to da da. Whatever he had said. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me. So, The Hobbit was a children's book. So you would have to expand upon the history in there, especially when we were so used to it from the previous films, from the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They really they gave you the books on film, which are full of their own material, but even then they gave you more with the prologue at the beginning of Fellowship of the Ring, where it talks about the Battle of the Second Age and how Sauron lost the ring to Isildur. And then they show you how Gollum became Gollum when he killed his cousin to get the One Ring, and transformed from a little hobbit-like creature into himself, into what became Gollum. They gave you that, which is, again, not really in the books. I mean, the Gollum story is, but it's told in a different perspective. It's told more as a story than it is a flashback. So I mean, we're used to it. It should have really just been expected that we were going to get a little more bang for our buck.
Yeah.
With the way Jackson and his team write these films and then produce and create these films. Overall, it was a fun movie. The only thing I'm afraid of is that the more I see it, the more I'm going to nitpick it and tear it apart, and really kind of flaws will stick out to me much more. As a trilogy, I enjoyed it. I loved it. It was a lot of fun. It's great to see moments of your childhood that you remember become more than just your imagination, to see it visually on a screen in front of you. It's just so fun. And when you see casting that you yourself have thought of come to life and fruition, again, it's just proof that there's people out there smarter than you who have the same thoughts, and so it makes you feel good about yourself. Battle of Five Armies is worth seeing. I'd probably give it an 80% ranking out of 100. It's not my highest. It's not bad, just because it's not 100 or a 10. If I gave it 8, it'd be 8 out of 10, 80 out of 100. It's not bad, but it aspires to be so much more.
Right.
So.
And I have the same take. I was going over it earlier today, and just 80%, like you said, is a justifiable way to put this film, because it did have the material. It did to portray that direction, the art, and everything like that. It did kind of bring that realm, and it brought it to a conclusion as well. But it's not to me, Desolation. I would have picked Desolation over Battle.
I would have too.
To be the, like, would you say, what's the best?
Would be the best film of the three.
The best of three.
Desolation of Smaug would probably be the best film of the 3 Hobbit films.
Yeah. But at the same time, though, every movie is formatted for a different audience.
All film is subjective.
So
what I think is good doesn't necessarily constitute what you think is good, or what you, the listener, think is good.
Right.
And you might have a higher ranking than us. You might think this is the best film you ever saw. That's fine. Perfectly fine.
Right. And no, there's no... I mean, obviously, look at all the different movies that come out, and you got people...
So much variety, and people bicker back and forth.
Yeah. I mean, that's all it is. But at the same time, it's one of those things to me is that I am intrigued with the Hobbit story, the Lord of the Rings, and I do want to see it come to a conclusion. So, am I going to go see it if it's a bad movie? Yes. Does it mean I'm seeing a bad movie just because I'm that biased or whatever? No. What it means is I prefer to know the story. It doesn't mean that I'm going to acknowledge it as the best movie, which is why I can give it an 80. I'm not gonna, say it's, and as like Desolation's more of my preference. And again, when I see a film, it just, the direction it goes, the way it works for me is that I want a bit of the story and character development. And that was another thing too with Battle of Five Armies. I felt the character development it worked kind of reversed, actually. All the characters were developed. Now, how do we, undevelop or reverse them or something? And that's kind of what I got for a couple characters. It's not something that I didn't expect. I kind of expected it coming, noticing how long the movie was and just how it was playing out. But it was just a different take on that whole... the whole passage of doing a cinematic experience. So,
all right. Well, really quick, folks, that is our review for The Hobbit, Battle of Five Armies. Please go out and see it if you want, as soon as you can. We do recommend seeing it in a theater. I know a lot of people download films, they wait for them. This is one to at least see in a theater. Really quickly, I just want to touch upon, since it's become fairly common now in the news realm, especially for entertainment news, is the Sony hacks. It's getting to be a lot. I mean, you're seeing new stuff every day about emails, about stuff with Spider-Man, about now stuff about Angelina Jolie, and just be mindful of where you're reading your news, who you're getting it from. We are not official reporters. We are simply commentators. We do this for fun because we love film. We love movies.
Well,
That's why we do this.
Another thing, too, is just even if we come across that, too, we always analyze it. It's like, okay, what evidence and proof do they have? I mean, you mentioned hacks and emails. It's like, okay, well, that's what one person said, but where's the proof? And ultimately, that's what we try to dig into, is where's the proof? Where's something we can actually stick to? If we stick to a rumor, that's going to become our expectation. So, yeah, we don't want to stick with that. We want to get down to what we know is going to happen or what's going to be, and then we're going to stick with that, because there's no point in trying to build up hope and expectations for something that you find out a week later, oh yeah, this guy was just kind of playing farce with people and just having fun. And that becomes like, oh great, well I spent this time just kind of thinking that, maybe he's right or whatever like that. I don't want to take the guess, so as when it comes to rumors, I'd like to see proof.
So as you see, any story that kind of starts with a guy on the set who knows a guy that is a source that heard it from this, more than likely what you're getting is hearsay. So again, just please be mindful of where you are getting your news. Again, we are not news reporters. We are commentators. We read the stories. We look for the truth as best we can. Sometimes even we get fooled, and believe in stuff that people are selling so genuinely that we believe it and ultimately comes out to be false. And if we do that, we apologize, and we honestly want to be as honest with you as possible as our listeners. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. Again, this has been our first review for The Hobbit, The Battle of Five Armies, out today, December 17th, 2014. I'm Vince Munn.
I'm Tommy Chapas.
This has been CineMunn Podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.